you mean by the return on investment?
How much they're going to gain by employing us to do their social media.
Okay.
Because Australians it is quite behind in social media compared to, say, the States.
So it shows up in your sales conversations primarily when you are having.
Yeah, especially when people don't understand that ROI is based on generating relationships with people,
yep.
and that people will buy from someone they know, like and trust.
Yes.
And with social media particularly, it's not an overnight fix. It takes time to, it's just like life. It takes time to build relationships with people.
Okay, all right. So would you be willing to work with me on stage later on when we do a bit of one-on-one hot seat stuff? That might be able to show something that we can potentially emulate, maybe. Yeah. What else? Where else are people stuck when it comes to sales?
The emotional trigger. So when you go through the process,
yes.
people will give you, they'll ask the facts or the whatever, but it's getting why they're actually in your room or in your store, or the truth behind what's actually.
So you're not able to elicit that?
That's right, yeah.
So that's more of a bit of, so essentially they're sitting in that space of, this is a risk, how am I covered at the end of it?
Exactly.
Okay, right. And how many of your, just show of hands, coaches and entrepreneurs? Okay. And how many of you are okay with charging the price that you're charging for your services? Are you guys okay? Like, is that the price point that you want to be at? No? No? Okay, good. So I'm like, okay, I'm in the wrong room. If you're okay with charging, there's no point in showing any of this. All right, great. Yeah, great. So I'll just share a short story of what happened a week ago. I purchased a new house, and as usual, it's Friday afternoon. I'm really relaxed. Everything's looking good. And suddenly my mortgage agent says, hey, Mihir, there is a slight problem. I'm like, okay, it's Friday, 3:30. What could be the problem? So look, something's happened with how the way it's structured. I didn't calculate everything properly, and essentially, we need to come up with $40,000 by maybe, if you can get it by Monday afternoon, that'd be great. I can work with it. I'm like, great, fine. So the only tool that I knew was pick up the phone and create valuable products or do something valuable and just sell at that point. And I just picked up, I called 2 people, went through the process that I'm about to share with you, and within 3 hours, I had $40,000 in my bank account. Done. So what I'm going to share, it is that powerful. But at the same time, it is something that has to be used with not with the manipulative influence side of it. So just please hold the best of intentions for your clients when you use that. All right. So is there a reason it's not? While Stuart, our technician, is fixing it, let's just work on a little bit. So when we talk about sales as a process, if we put it in the broader context of where it sits, there are three parts to it. Okay. So the first part is around the lead generation itself, and the second part is the actual sales process. And the third one is the actual fulfillment of a service. Okay. So in every stage, depending on how value is created, that essentially forms the overall entire customer experience of something. Now there are 5 different types of values essentially. First one is what people, like when you are generating a lead, they come to your website, they hear about you, they see something about you, right? There is a bit of a curiosity factor to it. Right? And essentially all the stuff that has gone around in that process of, oh, I'm curious, this is something that the messaging is right, I might want to look at the ebook that they're offering, I might want to look at the free session that they're offering. All of that leads to creating a bit more of a curiosity about this person. Right? And at the end of the day, the value that you're creating essentially is known as perceived value. Right? Because at that point, your client, your customer, potential lead only has one thing to go by. What am I perceiving about this, and is this a good match for me or not? Now, when they move to the next stage, essentially when you have a conversation about, let's say you are at a networking event, and you say, okay, you get people curious. Say, what do you do? I work with so-and-so, and these are the results that I produce. And then you have your own version of an audio logo, right? Who do you work with? What results do you promise? How do you go about doing that? That's the standard process. We can talk about a bit more. The moment they start asking you, oh great, how do you do it? If you get that question in your interaction, be it on a website, be it how do you do it? The moment they start, you check your analytics or, okay, well, what are people looking for? That's when you know you have moved the customer completely from a perceived value to a sales conversation at this point. So the how is what it says. That, okay, how do you do this? Please tell me. You've gotten them emotionally excited and curious to that point, right? Now, during the sales process, there are a few other different types of values that we can create in that process, right? First one is effectively when they let's say they decide to sit with you, have a conversation with you. So let's say they sit with me for 30 minutes. At that point, that whole process begins like they're discovering something about each other. For me, sales is a process of discovery of a match. You just sit there, you start exploring, what do you want? What would you like? How can I offer whatever it is that a good match or not? That's an ethical sales process, right? And then there is, of course, the used car salesman process, which kind of pushes you, hammers you, and that's what, it's an icky process at that point. So all sales, if done correctly, is a discovery of a match. And at that point, what you're doing is, what the value that's created is known as the discovered value in that process. That they are discovering something about you, and they are trying to ascertain in their mind, how is it going to work? Then the next step that happens along the way in the sales process, effectively the time comes when you have to ask for the money, like, oh, how are you going to do this, whatever. And they start asking for guarantees, the ROI side of it, is this going to work for me or not, or things like that, right? At that point, what they are effectively looking for is something known as a guaranteed value, okay? And the reason why I'm doing it here is because it's not in the slide back here. So, and then at the end of it, you go about delivering the whole process, right? And once you have delivered the whole process, that moves into the whole fulfillment side of it. The people work with you, they have an amazing experience, you've delivered the goods. And as a result of that, you have created something known as a promised value. So this is essentially, this is what I have promised, this is what I have delivered. And then what happens is, there is something known as a leveraged value. Usually what happens when people have great results working with you? Sorry? Refer others. What else you can do with that? You can get a testimonial. Right. How many of you have seen my video interview with Stuart and Matt? So that is known as leverage value. Because essentially you are leveraging all the results that you have delivered, all the goodwill that has been generated, and then you are using it to feed it back into the process at some level. All right? Does this help?
Yeah.
Right, great. So, discovered value means your password, Stuart.
Yeah.
Stuart 123. Oh, yes.
Let's ask a little bit more about the GB.
The GB. Sorry, which one? The
GB. Yeah, I know that it says guaranteed value, but
Yep.
a little bit more about that.
So, how many of you have encountered a question through your website or one-on-one when you are selling your products and services? How do I know that this is going to work for me?
I've tried so many before and nothing's ever worked. So then
I've
they
tried
want
this, yeah.
Guaranteed.
Exactly, they need a guarantee. What if this doesn't work? Am I going to get my money back? Right? This is that part of the guaranteed value is what differentiates a faith-based, value-based conversation versus a commodity-based. Right? Let's say John is selling this pen to me. Right? He's selling this. I buy it. Let's say it doesn't work and he just goes away somewhere. I'm like, thank God, John. And then at the end of that, I'm still left with this pen that doesn't work. But the emotional impact that it has on me is not as significantly high because it's a commodity. I can see, oh yeah, the pen didn't work and I have to go and get another one. It's easily available. There are millions of pens out there. I can just get another one. It's not emotionally that jarring to me. So when you are having conversations like, oh, I'm going to buy this product with you, would you be able to replace it if it doesn't work? That's when you know you are already sitting in that commodity space. Right? There are 3 types of markets usually that sales conversations or people place you in. How many of you are selling a service that requires a time for money exchange? And how many of you have been kind of like undercut or commoditized, like in that case? That's a very commodity-based market because there are tons of choices out there. People don't even think twice before they make a decision. They just go and buy it. Right? There is plenty of, and it's a bit odd for people to pay like, oh, it's a $300 pen unless it's a luxury item. But you don't expect to pay more than $3.95 or $2 for a pen. Then comes the second level of market, which is your intermediate market, where people have some choices, like you're making an air travel reservation somewhere. Right? They go to some site, they compare a little bit here and there. It is not fully commoditized, it's not really high value. People still want to go from point A to point B. There's something happening in between. So there's still some choices, but people have, at that point, the branding becomes a little bit more important. Oh, should I travel with Qantas or should I go with Virgin? Oh, Jetstar is cheap, it will take me there. I wouldn't fly Air Asia, things like that. You know, all those things, they play up quite a lot in people's minds. That's when you know you are in a bit of a commodity intermediate market. Okay. Now, when we talk about high value sales and high value markets, the experience that people have is completely one of leap of faith. All right? So, for example, if I were to ask Stuart, when we had our conversation, when we did our sales conversation with each other, what kind of experience did you walk away with? Like, did you have any reference to anything of that like that before in your?
No, we hadn't.
Okay.
No, not at all.
So that's the kind of experience you want to instill in your clients when they work with you at that point. That hey, there is nothing like that out there. It's a full leap of faith experience, and you have created enough value along the way for them to be in your system. Of course, you can do the sales process and do that, but where it gets enhanced is in the fulfillment process and how you deliver your results. Right? But the sales process is designed to help you leverage that and help you create that greater value in your system. Okay. So those are the 3 different types of markets, and if you're not getting the success in terms of asking for the level of revenue, the level of income that you would like to charge your clients for, then you're sitting in one of those markets. Your clients are actually pushing you down in one of these 2 markets. And if you find that happening in your sales conversation, there are objection handling techniques, there are processes that you can actually put in place so that that does not happen. Is this valuable? Are you? So, some of the sources, some of the people that I work with, I used to work in Silicon Valley with one of the largest IT companies there. It was France Telecom, based in US. And some of the coaches and people that have influenced the work that I'm doing here is Brian Franklin. He runs the California Leadership Center, and he's also the originator of the model that I'm going to show you. And this is something that he uses in terms of pitching his products to a large group of companies and having high quality sales conversion processes in place.
Is that Oren?
Not Oren, Brian Franklin.
Brian.
And then Oren Clough is the author of Pitch Anything, How to Pitch Anything. Now he comes from that hardcore finance world where every day he would be pitching products worth 60, 70, 80, 90 million dollars in front of Amex and Citibank and Goldman Sachs and things like that. And there's a video that I'm going to show shortly about how the energetic side of things comes into play when you are having an interaction with someone. And the whole meaning of, how many of you find that customers usually take you on a bit of a ride when you are trying to sell something to them and you get pulled into their story and then they have kind of dominated the conversation? Who has that experience here? Okay. So this is something to pay attention to. And then essentially my personal coach and mentor, Carl Buchheit, is somebody who I respect very highly, one of the most heart-centered people who has no sales bone in his body, but has some of the most beautiful, amazing techniques to be able to create spiritual and heart-based rapport when you're working with someone. Now, essentially what happened was,
Or just size it down, maybe, Mihir. On the other side, you just pull the size down.
Bottom right-hand corner.
Apple minus. Apple minus.
Everyone's an expert. Three sizes.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Apple minus. Still easy to read, even that size.
Is this all right for you to read?
We want to listen.
Yeah, that's fine. So, sorry about this, but essentially these are some of the executive coaches that I work with and learned, did my own executive coaching program through them. And some of the things that they noticed when they were working with some other coaches, that some of these coaches were absolutely brilliant at delivering what they did. They were amazing, and the same thing applied to entrepreneurs and business. So anybody who was in that sales position or an influence position, they saw that these are great people. How come that they are, they have such good coaching skills, but they are not getting the results? First, in terms of being financially well off. Secondly, not being able to charge the price point that they think that they are valued at. Right? And effectively, how is it that even though they are such good coaches, along the way in the coaching process, they are not getting the results? What was happening really out there? So they started looking at behaviors of what good quality, successful coaches were doing, and the ones who weren't doing this. And that's when they came up with saying that the coaching overall as a process, so in this case, we can extend that to your business overall as a process. What would happen in the sales conversation actually had a massive impact downstream on how your customer absolutely perceived and worked with you and the value that it created for them along the way. And when they decided to put those two things together, it was absolutely like a miracle at that point. Like, oh wow, how come that when the sales conversation goes really well, the client actually does end up receiving the results so powerfully? And how come is it that even though these are same coaches, but they've been put through a different system, that they're getting amazing results? So essentially how the sale was done impacted the overall outcome very greatly. And the first thing that they saw in a powerful coaching conversation or a powerful sales conversation, was the one who was holding the frame, the one who was holding the sandbox in which the client potential lead was working with, was driving the outcome. Okay. So for example, there were scenarios where the client would actually try to get on top by asking a lot of questions. Somehow the good coaches knew a way as to not be bought into that whole thing of being sucked into answering the questions, but at the same time providing enough comfort along the way for them to know that, hey, I'm taking care of you, don't worry, I'll answer everything along the way. All right? So think of it like when, let's say all of you in your conversations with your potential leads and clients, you are creating a sandbox, okay? A sandpit, and you are putting the right set of play equipment there. It could be your toys, a slide, a swing, whatever it is that you are putting in there. Now when kids come into play in that sandpit, they can only choose from what's being offered there, right? So essentially the one who has designed the sandpit, if they do it in an efficient, intelligent way, they can control where the kids are going to go and play, and you can now control the outcome of what can and cannot happen in that space to a greater degree. Does that help? Yeah. So essentially what they saw was frame control, controlling the frame of your conversation, controlling the frame in which your potential lead should play with, be it the price, or be it the value, or be it, what's it going to do for me, the risk side of it. Those were all different frames that all these good quality coaches were masterfully executing from time to time along the way. And when they weren't executing it, for sure they didn't get the sale at the high value price point. But when they were executing it, they were walking away with at least 20, 30 times what an average coach was charging at that point. And I can vouch for that because a long time ago, I was charging a few $100s for working, a few hours and things like that. There was a bit of a time for money model. The moment I started learning this from my coaches, it completely changed. So it went up 50, 60, 100 times in terms of the value as well as the price. Okay. So there's a powerful video that I would like to share. And it's by Oren Klaff. He talks about the notion of frames.
Imagine for a moment there's some kind of powerful energy field that surrounds all of us. It's transmitting from the depths of our subconscious. So this invisible defense shield is genetically designed to protect our conscious minds from sudden intrusion by ideas and perspectives that are not our own. We all have to have some kind of defense mechanism. And so when this energy field is overwhelmed, it collapses and our mental defenses fail. When that happens, we become subject to another person's ideas, desires, and commands. And that person can impose his will on us. So, look, I don't know. No one really knows if there are human energy fields or not. But for me, I think for you as well, it's the best way to think about the mental structures that shape the way we see the world. And I call these frames. And that's what we're here to talk about today. It's the power of frames, framing, deframing, and reframing. So let's just kind of get into it and find a metaphor for frames. Imagine looking at the world through a window frame that you hold in your hands, and as you move the frame around, the sounds and images you encounter are interpreted by your brain in ways that are consistent with how you think, your intelligence, your values, your ethics, all that stuff. This is your point of view. So your frame is really your point of view. But another person can look at the exact same frame through his frame. And what he sees may differ by a lot. So the common label people call this is perspective. So I perceive and interpret things differently than you do lots of times when we're looking at the same thing. So why does this matter? There are millions of people in the business world that each brings a frame, his own frame, to every social encounter. And here's the essence of it. When two or more people come together to communicate in a business setting, their frames square off, then come into contact, but not in a cooperative or friendly way. Frames are extremely competitive. Remember, they're rooted in survival instincts, and each frame seeks to sustain dominance. So when frames come together, the first thing they do is collide. And this isn't a friendly competition, it's a death match. Frames don't merge, they don't blend, and they don't intermingle. When they collide, the stronger frame absorbs the weaker. So this is the essence of it. When your frame and another frame come together, I'll say it again, they collide and the stronger frame absorbs the weaker. Only one frame will dominate after the exchange, and the other frames will be subordinate to the winner. This is what happens below the surface of every business meeting you attend, every sales call you make, and every person-to-person business communication you have. The moment your frame makes contact with the frame of the person you're calling on, or the person you're meeting with, they clash, battle, and grapple for dominance. If your frame wins, you will enjoy frame control, where your ideas are accepted, followed by others. But if your frame loses, you will be at the mercy of the other person, your customer, whoever you're trying to deal with, and your success will then depend only on their charity, not have frame control. Understanding how to harness and divide power frames is the most important thing we ever learn. So I think one of the most important things we cover, and I literally know what page it's on page 24 of the book, to page 25. Literally, own the frame, win the game. It's that simple. So if I was to do a quick review on frames and frame control, a frame is the instrument used to package power, authority, strength, and status. Everyone uses frames whether they realize it or not. And every social encounter brings frames together. Frames don't exist in the same place. the same time for very long. They crash into each other, and one or the other gains control. Only one frame survives, the others break and are absorbed. Stronger frames always absorb weaker frames. And finally, the winning frame governs every social interaction for the period of the interaction. When it does that, it is said to have frame control.
I can tell that this is a very hardcore I win, you lose type of mindset, but it shows up quite prominently in every sales conversation that I've had. That every time there is a potential lead or customer who actually wants to dominate the conversation a lot more. Right? Now, you want to ask, what is the way to handle or hold the conversation more powerfully? And the most powerful way to hold the conversation, and by holding the bigger frame, is by asking questions. So, one of the other things that so this are things that did not work in a good quality sales process, or things that did not work in a sales process. Far too often, how many of you have found yourself discussing the solution even before the customer has signed up with you? Does anyone have that experience? Second thing is, how many of you actually have bought into their limitations of money, time, this is not the right time for me, this is not the right thing for me, I don't know how to do this, is this going to, things like that. That is called buying into their ecosystem. Essentially, they are coming with their set of frames of what they believe is what they want, and then anything that shows up that is actually going to affect that view of their world, immediately the critical brain, the animal part of the brain kind of kicks in, and it says, uh-oh, this is not for me, and what can I come up with to not buy into this? Far too often I've seen coaches actually do buy into that. They say, oh, okay, all right, so, all right, good, let's reconnect in a few months' time when you have the funding situation sorted out and things like that, right? They buy into all the, now, one of the most critical things that actually happened was they saw that the good quality conversations, they were speaking only 30% of the time. 80%, 70% of the time, actually it was the client who was speaking. And the only time the coach or the salesperson was speaking was to ask a question around that. So they would say, oh, this is what happened, and the only question the salesperson would ask is, oh, pause there for a minute, what do you mean by that? What happened there? Immediately when they started doing that a lot more, asking a lot more questions by trying to hold the frame, they were able to actually navigate the outcome of the conversation in the direction of where it needs to go. Remember the example of the sandpit? Questions are like those equipment that you put in along the way that gives the guidance of where this conversation needs to go. Yeah? And how many of you have been actually, it's happened to me before, I used to do a lot of spiritual work and energy healing and things like that, and somebody would say, oh, so how do you do your healing? I would say, oh, I'm a Reiki master and I do his healing. Next thing I know, they're jumping on Google, looking for the method, and they're coming up with a reason as to why it won't work for them. Or, much worse, they were actually going to somebody else at that point. Right? So every time you're talking about a method, you're actually just literally cutting your future in that sense. That client is going to find for comparative. And this is how you get commoditized. These are the 4 things that actually bring down the value of what you're doing in fact. Yeah? So there are a few things that people tell themselves when it comes to sales. How many of you are actually genuinely uncomfortable when it comes to sales? Now there are a few things that they tell themselves. So, sorry, what's your name? Andy? What do you tell yourself when you feel uncomfortable about sales? What's the inner dialogue that goes on?
What do I tell myself?
Why isn't it that you are not able to sell at the price point?
Because I am the accidental marketer.
Ah, okay.
I reckon it's harder when I sell a higher price item.
Okay.
In my business,
Yes.
like most items are $200, it's not the end of the world for
Yes.
people. When I do a quote, it's say $1,500 or $3,000 for a residential home.
Yes.
Correct? I feel a little bit guilty, like, oh, you know, it's a lot of money. Oh, geez, you know, you know what I mean, you undervalue yourself and undervalue your service.
Exactly. So in your own mind, you have kind of made commoditized yourself to the point that you don't need them to do this for you. Thank you very much. I'll do it to myself rather than you doing it.
No, but I think people have that
Exactly.
perception. The
Exactly.
higher the price, I think people sometimes will feel guilty in what service they're giving.
Yes.
At the price.
Yes.
You know, like $1 is $1, but 100 grand's 100 grand. That's
Right.
why you're deceiving what you.
Right. So essentially, it's again reframing
Yeah,
something
yeah.
about how you're valuing what you're doing, and it need not be that you charge $500 or $1,500 or whatever it is. It can be other value items that you can add along the way.
Okay. Yep.
The whole package is the value. They are not buying just that process, right? They are buying peace of mind. They are buying security.
Yep.
They are buying you, the whole experience of working with you.
Okay.
That's the overall process. So let's say you say, hey, my products come with a lifetime guarantee, or you can call me anytime. This is the contact number, and this is what. And I'll check in with you in a few weeks' time and see how are you happy with this. I mean, who gives that service? Right? Suddenly you have moved out of that commodity market into a, like, oh wow, it's a personal value service in a locksmith. I've never heard of that, but that's how it can impact. So in general, there are a few lies that people tell when it comes to sales or high quality sales. It says, some people say, oh, it takes a certain personality. I have to be a people person. Now, I am an engineer by profession, by training, and I used to run away from people. You know, networking event, I would be the guy in the corner somewhere checking my phone. And I'm like, okay, it is time for me to do something different about it. It doesn't take a special type of personality. So if I'm here, for sure, everybody is a lot more beautiful looking and a lot more connected. And then people don't like to be sold. Right? There's a profound saying actually. So people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. It's not that they don't like to be sold. It's just that people hate incompetence. How often have you been to a restaurant where it's the first day of the waiter or the waitress who's serving you and they're making so many mistakes along the way, and then a part of you just wants to save that person from themselves and say, look, tell me where the kitchen is, I'm going to go and help myself. Instead of you screwing up my order and you not getting it right and things like that, right? It happens, right? So it's not that people don't like to be sold. It's just that they don't like incompetence in selling. If you don't really know how to create the right value, then it's like, I had an icky experience about it, right? There was a thing that happened to me at Flinders Street Station. I was just walking past and the guy comes up to me and says, sir, do you have children? I'm like, okay, yes I do, I have one kid. We are doing this thing for Hope Child Africa and things. And I'm like, oh great, it's good. So here's the form, so how would you like to pay? Cash or card? That was like a big WTF moment in my head, right? I'm like, you don't know me, do you even care? Do you even know that I care about this or not? Which I do, but the way the sale is done, it leaves you with that, absolutely icky experience out of it. So it's incompetence at its highest. And through the process of selling, how many times do you kind of nearly gone down to the level of like growl and begging like, okay, please, this is what I offer. What can I do for you? I'm not going to cut the price, and I'm going to, you start underselling yourself. You start cutting yourself more and more and more to the point you devalue, and the person is like, ooh, please stop it. I don't want to buy from that anymore, right? Has anyone had that experience internally? Of course, not necessarily I guess in an external format, but I've seen people who actually do that. They're like, oh, I want that client, what can I do? I can keep dropping my prices. I'm going to put in like 8 hours of my time as opposed to 3 sessions, things like that, right? Those are bad quality negotiation and bargaining processes that you resort to. And then, so effectively, this is the key here. Okay, so there are 6 phases in a good, powerful sales process. The first phase is curiosity. Fine. It's like you meet someone new, you're on a date, first date. Would you just go up and say, hey, can you marry me? Is that what you would say? Or you would say, oh, this is my name, what do you do? Things like that, right? Getting to be curious about it. There's a specific format in which you can go about doing this. The format is, are you curious about ... What that means is, what service do you sell, Andy? It's the social media. So, are you curious about how working with the best social media firm can actually double? What result would you be delivering then?
Brand building,
Brand building.
sales, it depends on the client.
So, as a result of that, what's the key thing that you're getting at? Are they making more money, or are they getting more? Are they getting known out there, or?
Everything, it's the whole package.
Okay.
But I think what I ask people is, what is their greatest challenge with social media?
Right.
And they might say to me, it's time, I don't have the expertise, I can't be on Facebook all the time, etc., etc., etc.
Okay. So, tell me which sounds better to you. If I were to say, hey, I'm a business coach, and I do business coaching, as opposed to, I work with entrepreneurs, coaches, and consultants and help them double their revenue in under 6 months. Or I say, in the last 2 years, I've taken 10 companies from under 200K to over 1.5, 2 million. Which one sounds more like, one gives credibility and the result. So are you curious about how, say, digital branding, how your specific digital branding strategy can actually take you from above the noise or something like that? So essentially you need a statement which says, are you curious about how doing X is going to give you Y? Right?
Does that large, this is something I come across a lot as well, and I find a lot of people look at their business from a qualitative standpoint,
Yeah.
rather than a quantitative standpoint, so they actually don't know specific measurable results, like you just so succinctly said, a specific measurable, tangible result.
Exactly. And this is what people buy.
Yeah.
Right? When you go to a restaurant, you buy things from the menu because it's specific, it's tangible, it's succinct, it's clear. Right? Cook me something. Oh, great, it's something. That's what you get. Nobody buys that. Yeah. So, did anyone have a question? Or you raise your hand. So, essentially, are you curious about how working with an Olympic gold medalist can help you achieve peak performance in your business? Right? I'm working with a fitness company. And I said, and they are actually starting to approach executives, saying that, hey, would you like to know how you can actually work, how you can apply the same principles that athletes apply in their performance, and how you can bring that to your business and your productivity? Guess what? Everybody was like, are you curious about it? We are not saying, are you interested? All we are saying is, are you curious about it? How many of you would be curious about that in your business? Yeah. Right? That's the thing. The first step is getting them just. If there is no curiosity, there is no point in moving forward anyway for your services. Right? I mean, I'm not curious about MLM marketing stuff. I'm not. It doesn't do anything for me. So if somebody were to say, oh, would you like to join my MLM? No, it's right away. It's a clear decision, right? So things like that. So in your mind right now, think about what is your specific credibility statement. Are you curious about how working with me or working with X or working whatever that is for you, you need to get clear on that absolutely. And what result your client's going to get as a result of that. Okay. So that's the first step of creating curiosity. Now every step here has a counterpart. There is a question that goes with that step, and there is an emotional experience that your client or your lead needs to experience within themselves. They need to experience a feeling of real, genuine curiosity. You need to be able to feel it in your body when you're sitting with them. And if it's a congruent, if it's a like, meh type of a thing, then you know that you haven't created enough curiosity for them to go and move any further than that. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Now the second step is decision maker. Now the reason that there is a specific sequence, because the brain somehow needs the sequence so as to feel that they are empowered, that they are in charge, that they are on the right track, and they can actually make the call at the end of the day, whether they... So the second step is the feeling of empowerment, that every person who's sitting in that seat needs to feel a sense of empowerment. The reason why that came about is that how many of you have been on sales calls where they say, where everything goes through and then they say, hey, look, you know what, actually I need to check in with my partner and I'll get back to you.
I'll talk to my wife or husband.
Right? How many of you had that experience? And then the whole sales process doesn't go anywhere because usually most of the times they convince themselves that the partner said, oh, that she's not ready for it, I can't get into it and I can't buy this anymore. Right? That's how usually it ends up being. So at this stage, what I would normally do is that, so when it comes to making the specific question you can ask at that point in the decision maker would be, so assuming we are going to work together, okay? There is a subconscious embedded kind of command here which says we are going to work together. So assuming we are going to work together and assuming you are the decision maker, is there anyone else you need to check in with before making a commitment? We are just asking, are you the key decision maker? What do 90% of the people want to experience about themselves? Empowerment, that they are in control, that I am significant enough. And for them to be able to say yes to it is a very powerful, empowering space at that point. And at the same time, you want to avoid that next step of, oh yeah, I need to check in with my partner, right? So at that point, all you need to say is that, oh, how about we do this? We reschedule this at a point where both of you can be there. That way, it's more valuable for all of you, and we can have a conversation back then. You can just stop that meeting here. I've done that. There are executives, there are people that you approach.
If you were making an appointment for a salesperson to go out to see someone,
Yes.
would the person making the appointment say that? Like assuming we're going to work together, because we normally ask, are you the decision maker, is there anyone else?
So you can
would
do
they
it in
say
two
that,
stages.
Or would the salesperson say that once they're out there? How would you then rephrase that so that,
Yeah, good question. So you're talking more about who's doing the lead setting at that point. So you can give them a
it's
script.
a call centre for our
Yeah.
business, and then the sales team goes out.
Yeah. So essentially, you can give them a script that has just enough level of empowerment built into the process, right? I'm in the process of working with a call center, and then I've given them a list of questions that they can ask just to qualify them enough.
Yes.
Say that, hey, is your business something that needs growth? Who should we speak with? That would be a good starting point as well. Who would be the right person who we can have a conversation with? And if that's not the decision maker, they will usually put you through that process.
Yes, they're getting through the boss or whoever, but then, like the other day, they put in a proposal for a particular job, and it all went so smoothly, and the guy goes, yes, looks fantastic, and then my dad doesn't like it. So here's this 70-year-old dad still controlling the business, and they've forgotten to include him in the whole process.
Right.
So then, no, it's going to
So there's a bigger conversation in terms of the strategy on how you can manage that, because there are things you can do before the meeting itself. That way it ensures that the person is actually primed and ready for that conversation, setting the context right. So that's the other thing, that if you are going to have a high value sales conversation, let them know that you are going to have a conversation with them about how you can potentially work together or not. And then the intention at the end of the meeting would be for them to be able to decide if this is a good match or not. That way they know that you are going to come in with a proposal and asking them to make a decision. Because the worst thing is when you walk into some place and suddenly somebody just kind of pulls you into that conversation, you're like, hey, I am not even ready for it. Come on, I thought I was just coming for a coffee. What are you selling this to me for? That's what breaks your trust and integrity in the process of okay. So the next phase is essentially the third phase is one of the most powerful phases of any sales conversation. It's called the value creation phase. In the value creation phase, you essentially want to get as deep into their world as possible. You want to find out, you want to take on their belief system. So let's say if I'm working with Justin, I would want to step into his view of the world. Right? Why is he experiencing what he is experiencing about his business, his life? So you kind of leave yourself behind. It's a little bit of a meta NLP for this. You just step out of yourself, completely step into that person, look through their eyes, breathe through their nose, take on their view of the world, take on their belief systems. Okay? And this is where you are actually going to speak about things that they are afraid to talk about. This is the phase that builds or makes or breaks the whole process. So let's say if somebody has anger issues and wants you to coach them. And let's say you have unresolved anger issues and you know at a deeper level that you can't potentially coach them. What it does is that energetically the person senses it that you have that shadow side of you. That you have a part of you that you are not willing to go, and your client actually will hide in that space for you. They will not go there. Same thing in a sales conversation, right? So when you are sitting with your potential client, I pay full attention to how I'm energetically feeling at that point. Because they could be explaining a lot of things, but internally if my experience is one of anxiety or one of chaos or one of something like that, I just tell them that, hey, look, I'm feeling that there's a lot of chaos in this process. Is this something that you're feeling? It's like speaking the unspoken, being okay with saying that. And this works even if it's a corporate client, personal client, doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, just realize that at the end of the day, you're working with a human who has an emotional problem. That's all you're solving. That's the whole end gist of it. If you make it anything bigger than that, that's when you're bought into all the other stuff of why it's not going to sell and, oh, they are much bigger than me and I can't buy this or I don't have the credibility about it and things like that. At the end of the day, we are dealing with another human who has something emotional stuckness about their situation. So this phase primarily requires you to calibrate them on a few things, getting them absolutely clear, like what is it that you want really, right? Sometimes the best things that have come out of my sales processes is the person says, oh wow, Mihir, I sat with you and I did not, even though I was not ready at that time, but I walked away with amazing clarity of where things are at and where I need to go. How many of you believe that is valuable actually? That is a gift that you're giving to people. Yeah, it's powerful. So getting them clear about what it is that they want. Asking them when have they tried doing something so big and when has it worked and when it hasn't worked. Because there's this whole conversation about ecosystem and how people actually always try to create a result that they know they can't have it in their current system. Is that what you call it, the ecosystem? But asking them, hey, I have a red flag about some of these things. Like if somebody has never done business more than 50,000 and they are saying, can you work with me for a year and make $1 million business? My attention goes to why. Why is it that they're asking for $1 million business when they actually haven't understood the value creation process properly enough? Right? If you look at the income that you're generating as a scorecard of how much value are people perceiving about your process, it gives you a good understanding of where your beliefs are and at what level you're playing. So if somebody who's never done that level of business and suddenly wants to have a bite size that is massive, it gives me red flags about it. I'm not doubting any of it, but I want to understand what assets they have in place. Right? Are their current processes, their systems, their infrastructure, are those things ready for them to bear the load of $1 million business? Right? So asking them things that this is what puts you as a salesperson, as whatever services you are selling as a coach, etc., way beyond everybody else, the ordinary, because you're speaking the unspoken, you're genuinely sitting in that frame of curiosity. How can I help this? What do I need to know? Right? And essentially getting into their world, establish your credibility by telling stories. When they will try to ask you questions about, have you done this before? And you say, look, the question here is not whether I've done it before or not. The question here is whether it's going to work for you or not. That's what you're asking. And then yes, I know it works because there have been people who have been in similar situations and have been helped through this process. But none of that will matter if it doesn't work for you. And then bringing it back with a question. So what would you like to do? Remember, every time you have a conversation in that process when the client is trying to dominate, you just bring it back. It's a bit like that martial arts stuff. They come with you with that energy of asking questions. You just turn it around and you do a bit of asking the question back. That is how you gently take the control of the conversation back. So this process, the client absolutely needs to feel possibility and trust. Possibility that their future, what they are signing up for, is something that you can help deliver or at least take them at that point. And be okay with walking away as well internally if you feel that it's not the right match. Because remember, all of sales is a discovery of a match. If it's not a match, just be okay to say that too. It has no reflection on whether you are good enough or not. That's a separate value conversation of how you relate to yourself. And then how are you actually trying to differentiate yourself from everybody else? Because remember, there's a commoditization that happens. So, but I saw, what's your name, Sean? So I saw Sean's services, and he charges this much, and he does that much for me, and all that. What would you say? It's like, it's that kind of how would you reframe yourself in those situations? So there are many techniques or objection handling things that you can do that help you along the way. Now just realize that even if you don't know any of this, but if you just take them through this process by asking just the right questions along the way, the first stage will be curiosity. Are you curious about X and Y? Are you the decision maker? The third question would be, so what is it that you want? Because at the end of establishing, finding out all this, what you have done is you have just helped them uncover in their own mind what it is that they really want. And then you end that phase by asking, so what is it that you want? And they say, oh, I want a pony, or I want something like that. Yeah? They would be asking for whatever that is. And at the end of it, you should say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you would like to achieve, you would like to double your revenue in at least in 6 to 9 months. Is that correct? You can also ask them, so what is it that is important about you that should happen along the way for you to know that this is working? Remember, I'm asking questions. I'm not giving them the solution. I'm just sitting in their world fully. How many of you are finding this valuable? Okay.
Can you just say that last bit again? The last thing that you said?
Which one?
So what is it about you along the line?
What is it that needs, like a lot of people say, oh, how will we know this is working? I would say, what would you like to put as a metric so that we know that this is working? Right? Because the best metric for them to go by is their own metric of how they want to do it. So they might say, oh, I want to have 30,000 in the first month and 50,000 in the second month. I would say, okay, that's fine, we can play the money game. But what I would like to know from you is that do you have the infrastructure and the sales skills ready to be able to do that on your own? I can always help you achieve that. Can you deliver for what you're signing up for? Because far too often, I've had conversations where they expect the coach to deliver on your behalf, right? And the conversation needs to be like, hey, I'm the coach here, I'll coach you, but you need to go and play the game. So things like that, those are all ways in which the client actually tries to dominate. And essentially, it tests your self-worth about it, right? Oh, I felt like I couldn't deliver, they were asking too much of me, I don't know, and you sign up something and you have this anxiety about it. But you don't need to go through that process. So at the end of it, if you have established this third step properly, the fourth one is ready to act. So you can ask, so when would you like to work on this thing? Is this something urgent of an issue? Because if it's not an urgent issue, it's not going to go anywhere. It'll just be a conversation which says, yeah, we're ready to start, we have something going on, and then we'll do it. So how much of this is really a pain at the moment? So asking them, because the emotion that your client needs to feel is a sense of urgency. Because if you have created enough powerful value in the process, they would want to actually work with you right then and there. They would say, oh yes, I want to get started. Right? Unless there are compelling circumstances and things like that. But in most instances, they either make an emotional commitment to work with you, and they do come back. And then there are instances where you know that if the client is not in an urgent situation, they're not going to come back. But what they tell you is, I'll think about it and I'll get back to you. All right, great, thank you, great chatting. And the last, so essentially, this is where a lot of people get unstuck. So they say, oh, this is the part when time for money conversation changes into a value conversation. In my coaching, I work with people on a month-to-month basis. There is none of this, how many hours, oh, how much time am I going to get with you? I tell them, how much time do you need? 24/7, I'll be there for you whenever you need it. So once you have established enough value, we can say, so if money wasn't a challenge, if money wasn't a problem, is $5,000 a month a fair investment for you to achieve $1 million a year outcome? How did that sound? How did that land for you? No brainer, right? So essentially you are reminding them what result they have signed up for. And in relation to that, you are putting your value, saying that, okay, at $1 million a year, would you be willing to invest 60,000 a year to get that $1 million?
What if the value wasn't a financial amount, let's say it was a service provided?
So what service?
So for example, we act on a government contract where we're providing information to a customer and basically they're benefiting the monetary side of it.
Right.
How do you then close the sale without having an actual value?
So in your business, what acts as a sign of commitment from the customer?
Training their staff.
Training their staff. And what does it look like? A contract or a
Yes.
financial obligation on part of the?
Yes.
Yes, that is the sales at the end of it. So it is a monetary thing, right? No?
Yes.
The employer is the one that's actually benefiting financially. So we give them the money,
Yes.
they just have to choose to use us as opposed to the other 6 apprenticeship centres.
Right. So you can ask them. You can reframe it a little differently. So what would need to happen for you to choose us as the only person, as the recommended partner, or as the only person institution to work? They will tell you right away. They will tell you what is it that we would need to do for you so that we can be the perfect choice for you. And they will tell you that. And if the terms are saying that, okay, all right, so if we can do that, would you be willing to move to the next stage? Would you be willing to move ahead with that right now? Does that help?
Yes.
So essentially, at this point, the client should experience like, duh, yeah, I would invest in that. It's a no-brainer. And the last one is, effectively, now that they've made a decision, you want them to move ahead and give them a sense of, okay, when do I start? And at that point, you just say, yeah, okay, let's start. Let me book in the time with you. Let's get the contracts in place, and you make the booking for whatever it is that you need to do next. As immediately you need to give something physical, that they will feel like, oh wow, I got something in return and I've signed up now. Okay. So in general, that's the sales process.